think in the interest of time, I'll go ahead and get started. I'm pleased to be with you this morning. I'm Susan Culpepper with UGA Extension right here in Douglas County. And while you're enjoying this nice, yummy lunch, let's think forward to dinner and think about what's for dinner. So we're going to think about that in a way of talking about freezer meal planning. Now, this program really grew out of some questions that I get in our office and questions that come out of other programs. And I'm sure you might answer these questions similarly. So do you ever get to lunchtime or in the afternoon and then you wonder, what's for dinner tonight? And do you ever wish that you had more time to sit down with your family or your loved ones and spend more time together over dinner? Most of us would say yes. And then do you ever wish that you could, that you relied less on fast food, but more on home cooking? Most of us. And then the last one, do you wish you had more time to make all of this happen? We hopefully today will solve or answer some of those questions with our freezer meal planning. So what I want us to look at today, and I'm going to have some handouts for you and talk us through this. We're going to talk about some different options of how to think through freezing your food. We're going to talk about the food preservation method of freezing, how to think through that. What are the benefits of freezer meal planning? We're going to talk about some steps that you would take to make it happen. Some resources, where can you find recipes and further information. And we're also going to talk about food quality and food safety. So I'm going to go ahead and give you a couple of these handouts, and I'm fortunate today to have several assistants from our office. This is Elaine Hopkins. She's one of our 4-H program assistants. We have Jan Hooten, who is our Extension Secretary, and then Rose Smith is also here, and she is making sure that our casserole, we have a sample casserole today, that we get that cooked and ready in time. So you have one kind of main outline cover sheet, both of these will be in yellow, and then you're also going to have a nice handout from the University of Kentucky that's going to give you some recipes and other details. So the single sheet is really kind of an overview, very similar to what it says in our slides. So we're going to move kind of quickly, but feel free to email me or call me. I have some business cards and my information will be on the last slide today. I'll be glad to help you in the future, answer any questions. So let's talk about overall how to think about making multiple meals. So when you're thinking about freezer meal planning, here is one method. The simplest method and the one I suggest you start with, and you might already be doing this almost unconsciously or maybe very purposefully, make double or make triple. If you have a favorite casserole, a favorite soup or stew, you can start there, make double or triple, freeze the extra, and then it'll be available for you later on. So make extra and then freeze it. That's one method. So the next method is to plan a way to exchange dishes, your favorite dishes, with friends or family. It might be that I have a beef stew recipe passed down from my mother, and it's a favorite of most people that eat it. I can make 3 or 4 portions of that. I may have a family member or neighbor who makes a great lasagna, another one that makes another type of soup or stew like this, something like a pasta and vegetable soup. And so we could all make our own recipes. We can make 3 or 4 portions and then share them with each other. So if you have family or friends that you know well enough, that's a good option. It's fun, and you get to try a variety of recipes. The last method, to make a more complex plan, can be done, and there are books and information. There's information on the internet and lots of books out there. There's folks who have figured out how to shop and plan. They cook for 2 or 3 days or over a weekend, and they make enough meals to serve themselves almost a month. They can make several weeks at least. Now you need to put certain things in place, like a large enough freezer space, but that can be done. I don't suggest starting with that right off because it can be overwhelming, and you want to be successful when you're starting out. Let's look in this freezer, and let's find some things that we really like about this freezer. What do you see that, that you might be able to follow or that looks good?
Labeled.
It's labeled. Very good.
Very organized.
It's organized so you can see what you have.
Looks like it's portion controlled.
Right. Yes, they have deliberately controlled the portions, and when they're freezing these certain items, they are kind of controlling or planning how that will freeze, and we will talk about that in just a few minutes. How can you make that happen? They've also used a variety of containers. They've used their freezer bags and cartons and foil, depending on what they're freezing and what is ideal for that type of food. So I think we all wished our freezer looked like this. I know I wish that, but you can get there. You can do that little by little. So the next item is, let's look at some benefits, and this is also on your yellow paper. But let me pause right here and describe something about one of these. Thank you. Before we go any further, there are lots of resources on the internet. This publication from the University of Kentucky does a good job of giving you an overview, gives you tips and tricks. It has some time frames, a schedule here of how long you can freeze things. And then it does have some nice recipes included. It starts with chicken. You roast a couple of chickens, and then it gives you 3 recipes, including a chicken pot pie, which we're going to have a similar version today, but I've made a few changes in this recipe. So there are 3 chicken recipes suggested. And then they give you on the bottom of page 5, you make a large quantity, you see 22 cups of the marinara meat sauce, and then you use that for several other recipes. So they've made a plan and helped us out here with a suggested way to get started. So that's a nice overview and publication there.
I have a quick question.
Okay.
Take turkey out of the freezer, put it in a bowl, put it on the counter for thawing out. 7 hours thawing, put it in the refrigerator and let it continue thawing out. At that point in time, has it developed any issues or at this time?
What I would suggest is try to plan ahead to thaw it fully in the refrigerator. It's safer to thaw in the refrigerator, and that brings us to the next slide actually of the benefits about food waste and temperatures, and also about food safety. So thaw in the refrigerator, you're controlling the temperature because your refrigerator, you want it to be at about 38 to 40 degrees. That lower temperature, lower than your room temperature where you might be thawing in the refrigerator reduces the growth of the bacteria. So if you can thaw it there, if you run out of time, thaw in cold water or in a bowl of water and change out that water. Both of those are preferable to thawing on the countertop, because what can happen easily, even with a small portion of food like ground beef or chicken or roast, is the outside, as you can imagine, comes to room temperature while the inside is still frozen. So the outside is at room temperature. You have more risk of the bacteria growing between that 40 and 140 degrees. So we want to minimize that risk and thaw in the refrigerator as often as possible. Does that help to answer? Okay. So we're talking a bit about food safety, and we're talking about the temperatures that we need to look at. So let's stay right here for a minute. We talked about the refrigerator temperature, and if you can take a look at this slide, if we had a little darker room, you might be able to see, what do you think this is on this food? That is mold. And if you plan ahead, our point is, if you plan ahead, go ahead and put that in the freezer. You can buy smaller containers, such as these freezer cartons. You can use jars, you can use freezer bags. Go ahead and freeze that right away. Then you won't waste your food. You won't have such a problem with spending your time and energy and money and then having to throw the food out. We are learning more and more a pretty significant quantity of the food in the U.S. We waste food. None of us really plan to do that, of course, but it's wasted between the farm and the table. So we're looking at how to minimize that waste, save our money, and feed more people on a different note. So keeping your refrigerator and freezer at the proper temperature is one key to that. And how do you know? How can you know what is the temperature of your refrigerator or freezer? Yes, a thermometer. A thermometer such as one of these. This is a dial thermometer. It probably costs $5 or $6. You can sit this in your refrigerator or freezer, and then you can check the temperature. Also, there are similar ones like this. It's a little harder to read, but it'll hang in your refrigerator or freezer, and it tells you the temperature zones. So if we go home, probably for most of us, and look in our refrigerator or freezer, and we have a dial gauge in there, right? And it says ABC or 1, 2, 3. And we don't really know what that means. Some refrigerators and freezers today might have a digital readout, a little more expensive type, and those are very nice, but not everybody has one of those. So rather than trusting, which they are very trustworthy, but rather than just trusting the dial, you can get your thermometer, and when your refrigerator is at 38 to 40, your food's going to be fresher, better quality for a longer period of time. You minimize the food waste. Now the same principle is true for the freezer, but interestingly, check out this temperature where we should have our freezer. Do you notice anything curious? Where does food, at what temperature does our food really freeze?
30 degrees.
At 32. But we really want to keep our freezer at 0 degrees Fahrenheit because, again, it will last longer at a better quality. So checking the freezer is important and lowering it below that 32. If you're making a lot of food to put in your freezer at one time, even making the temperature lower than 0 is a good thing to do for a while. So reducing food waste is important, and we'll look at the next benefit. Of course, we can reduce the cost of eating out. Here's an example of a spaghetti dinner for 2 adults and 2 children. If we have a salad with croutons, we have bread, and we have meat sauce and spaghetti noodles. And some of these are average prices. We might be able to find these things at a lower price, maybe a higher price, but you see a good example here, around $23 plus tax, about $23.69 if we bought this in the grocery store. So we'd like to reduce the cost of eating out, but we know we have a trade-off. There's convenience of eating out, and you kind of pay to play in that way. And we'll talk about some other benefits and ways of saving money and still eating at home. But it's a good tip, important to know we can reduce our cost, our total food cost, by eating at home more, eating out less. And now we'll look at the next one, improving nutrition. As we said earlier, you know what's in the food that you make. You can adjust the recipes. You can control for the fat, the calories, the sodium. You can add more fruits and vegetables. Most of us need to do that. You can add more fiber. So you know what's in the food that you're cooking and making at home. The next one, of course, spending more time with your family. If you're planning ahead, cooking in quantity, it reduces your stress level when it comes to dinner time, and there's more time to think about and spend time with your family. Your family meals will be smoother. In many cases, you can include your family in making the food. That might work out. Then they have the pride of eating what they've prepared, and you have more time to spend with your family. We know this intuitively, but research tells us that families who eat together just a few nights a week, their children are better off. Their children do better in school. They have less risk of substance abuse issues, other mental health problems, and eating at home is a great way to do that. It's a great time to talk about what happened in our day, what we're planning as a family coming up. There are a lot of benefits to spending time together with mealtime as a family. We started talking about food safety, so let's look at that a bit more. Our goal is, one of the goals is to cook fewer times. There's less opportunities for contamination when you are minimizing how many times food is at room temperature, for instance. We want to remember another rule besides our temperatures of the refrigerator or freezer. We want to remember the 2-hour rule, and I referred to that earlier. This room temperature between 40 and 140, only 2 hours at room temperature is what we would like, maybe even less than 2 hours. What we know is the bacteria and the microorganisms that cause food illness, they grow exponentially in this room temperature area. So we want to minimize that. Of course, we don't want to get sick or make other people sick. So we want to refrigerate within the 2 hours or reheat those foods also. So those are two options there. So you can improve and control the food safety in your home. Include the family in preparing. There are lots of ways. If you have children or other family members, depending on their age, they can chop, they can mix, they can package the foods that you're making. And it's a great time to talk about things with your family. If there's topics you realize, like I have a teenage son right now who's 14, certain things it's hard to get him to talk about. But if we get into an activity or event, it's easier for me to sway into, well, what's happening on the bus? Are you still sitting by so-and-so? How's that going? Because we're doing and focusing on these other items also. Now, of course, we want to teach our children and help our family members to learn to make food for themselves and to have this kind of experience as a family. Okay? So, and we talked about answering the question of what's for dinner. So the bottom line is, you know, you have a plan, you know what's going to be happening around dinner time, you're more confident, and you're ready when dinner time comes. So let's move to the next section and talk about some planning. This is also on your yellow form. Let's talk about some steps in how you can organize yourself and how you can plan ahead whether you're starting with 2 or 3 recipes or many, many more. One of the first steps is to make a plan. So pick a menu. So let's think for a few minutes, what recipe or group of recipes would you pick? You might have some things you're already making. I do suggest, as I said earlier, soups and stews and casseroles. Those are good places to start. Mostly they freeze very well. So pick a menu, and then, as you would do, check what you have at home, what you already have in the inventory, and then make a plan for what you need to purchase for shopping. So you're going to make that plan, and then when you're shopping, you can also plan ahead a bit. How many of you use coupons? Some of us do. And the electronic coupons, of course, prevent you from having to clip them out. And how many people check various stores and prices? We have a lot of grocery stores in the Douglasville area to choose from. So we should have some competitive prices. You can check the ads, and if you can match up a great sale price with couponing or the buy one get ones, then you're getting the very best deal. That takes a little more planning and diligence, but it can really pay off. So you want to, if you can, shop when big ticket items are on sale. If you know you're using a lot of beans or peas or canned tomatoes, look for those when they're on sale. Know your store policies. Most of the grocery stores, when they have a buy one get one, you can buy just one item and get it at half price. So that's an advantage. And some stores match or double your coupons. Then when you get home, if you want to leave your canned goods, non-perishable things handy on the countertop, if you're cooking soon, you can do that. It saves you a step from putting those away and bringing them back out. So then after we shop, we want to make the next step, and that is to gather the items or utensils that you need. You might need some pots, some bowls, all your spoons and utensils. Get those together just like you're creating an assembly line at home. So get those clean and within easy reach, and then go ahead and think ahead about packaging and containers. And we have some samples here today of those, of things that are good to use to freeze in. You have some of the brands will sell freezer containers, very similar. You see storage containers like these. And this brand has some freezer containers, and the difference is these are a bit more heavy duty. If you put something in your freezer and it's frozen and it accidentally falls out of the freezer like it does at my house, if it's in the storage containers, it'll still freeze, but those containers will break and become brittle. These last longer, they're a little more sturdy. They do go into the dishwasher and microwave. You can buy these other types of freezer containers that are sold for primarily years ago for if you're freezing fruits or vegetables in harvest season. So this is one example. You can use canning jars. The heavy duty thickness of the glass make them just fine for freezing. Of course, you don't want them to fall out by accident, but they work very well. Some of the reusable containers like butter or sour cream containers, they will work for you in a pinch, but they're not as thick. They're really not designed necessarily for freezing and for reuse. So these are some better choices. Some other things to consider: freezer bags, you're probably well aware of, but keep in mind there's a difference in storage bags, and these we have quart and we have gallon. I have a variety of brands here today. They do make, most all the brands and store brands make the freezer bags. They are a thicker material, so they're going to help to prevent that freezer burn. They're going to be thicker. They're going to keep your food at a better quality for a longer period of time. And I have some examples of these freezer and storage bags that you can, if you think about it, you can feel the difference in those. Aluminum foil is good for freezing. I do recommend the heavy duty. It doesn't tear as often or as badly, so there is a difference, a big difference in the heavy duty and the regular foil. And then freezer containers such as these, which can be used in the freezer. If you want a smaller quantity, you can even buy these in more of a single serving size. They sometimes come with a cardboard lid, or you can cover these with foil. These are more disposable pans, but you can use them to freeze and then to bake in. So these are some examples. In just a few minutes, we'll look at another technique of using these containers and making them work over and over for you. So gathering all your utensils, all your things that you'll need, and planning ahead is important. The other thing I'll say about these, the storage containers, the freezer containers, and the other heavier, Rubbermaid is one brand. I think Glad has some heavier duty, really good looking containers that are up to 2 or 3 quart down to 1 cup size. Look for those when they're on sale. Many of the grocery stores will go through cycles where they're half price, which is really a great price for you. So those work very well too. They look nice on the table, and they go from the refrigerator to freezer to the microwave very well. So looking for sales on all of these items can save you money. So after our containers, after we gather our items, then we want to think about preparation and think through, when we're analyzing our recipes, can something be done the night before? If we're going to, for instance, start with the chicken recipes, and we suggest here, these recipes do, that you start with 2 whole chickens and you roast them in the oven. These are about 6 pounds each. They're a little larger. So we could do that the night before. And then we could refrigerate that, and the next day begin our other preparation. So planning ahead what can be done the night before, and get yourself organized to process that. That's another nice tip. And then after the preparation, when you combine the items and you start the steps of the recipe, you don't want to repeat the same task separately. And what I mean by that is, if you notice 2 or 3 recipes have chopped onion or chopped garlic or chopped carrots, and you need 2 cups for a certain recipe and 3 cups for another, just combine that and chop 5 cups at the same time if you needed 5 cups total of onion, and then you have that available for yourself instead of creating one recipe and kind of stopping and then starting all over with your chopping for the additional recipes. So combine those tasks so that you're saving time when you're making the quantity that you want to make. So you want to, again, think of this as an assembly line. You will get much better at it over time and be able to delegate also with your family. So after combining, the assembly is really one of the best parts because you see everything come together. We talked about our containers. You do want to label the recipes and include the cooking instructions. And what you want on that label is you want the name of the recipe, Grandma's Chicken Pot Pie, the date that you're freezing it, how many people it will serve. Serves about 6 people. And then you might write, you can just write this on a piece of paper and tape it onto your container. You might write, bake at 350 degrees for about 40 minutes. So if you have that label, we saw in the beginning our freezer labels, then you know what's in your freezer. You don't just have a lot of aluminum foil packages in there wondering, is it beef stew, is it chicken? And you can call someone else when you're on your way home, for instance. You can get somebody else in your house to help you out. You can say, hey, that casserole is thawing in the refrigerator. Preheat the oven to 350 and put it in there at 5 o'clock. And then they can help you, your family can help you get started and move through things. And you have those instructions written down to help them out. So after the assembly, we'll think about the freezing. We talked about our containers. You want to cool things quickly. A great way to cool things quickly, and this is something I used last night. This is a container. There are many containers you might be able to use. Even this size is a good size. But for larger casseroles, if I'm making a casserole this size, and I make 2 or 3 for whatever purpose, and I want to cool them down, and I don't want to leave them at room temperature for too long, but they're pretty warm from the assembly. I can get a large pan like this. You can buy them at the store. You can save them if you ever get quantities of food from a barbecue place or any other restaurant. I'll take this size pan. I'm making a casserole such as this or other quantities. I put it down in the pan, and then I'm going to put cold water and ice in this pan. I'm making a kind of an ice water bath to cool this much more quickly. So I can change out this water if I need to, but if you put a good bit of ice to start, you see you have plenty of room where that ice water cools your dish. You can more quickly finish your task, label, and put this in the freezer. So that is one tip for freezing. Another tip that really works out well is to use the same casserole dish over and over. We're going to freeze our casserole or item and then be able to lift it out. So I might be using this dish, I might be using a glass casserole dish or a more heavy-duty aluminum one. You can buy wider aluminum foil, but if you don't have that or can't find it, you can make your own wide piece of foil by making a seam in the top. Make a simple seam. You're just going to fold this over 2 or 3 times. Then I'll take this, let's pretend this is a glass casserole dish. I'm going to press this down. I'm using heavy duty foil because it's more durable. So here I have this. And I'm going to make my grandma's chicken pot pie or whatever type of casserole. When I prepare that, I pour it in this dish. And then I can fold up the foil. I should have cut this foil a bit longer, but we'll fold this up, and you want to make the same kind of seam in your foil of folding it over 2 or 3 times. That creates a much better seal. It's sort of like wrapping a package. So we'll make that seam, for instance there, and then the end you will fold it like you're wrapping a package 2 or 3 times. When your food is in here, it works a good bit better. So I'll fold the other side with my food is inside, and then I'm going to put this is my glass or metal dish here. I'm going to put it right in the freezer. So it's in the freezer, it's freezing half a day overnight. When it's frozen, I lift out my casserole. I label the casserole. I have this dish to reuse over and over and over whenever. I put my casserole back. It's a perfect size to stack or to make the maximum use of the space in my freezer. You can use the same method with soups or stews if you're filling in the freezer bags and you fill this with something liquid. You fill it, get all the air out if you can. You can freeze it in this dish and it'll conform, of course, to the size of the dish. Then once it's frozen, lift it out. You can stack those in your freezer. So that's a tip to help control the space in your freezer, to reuse your containers. And then when I want to make Grandma's chicken pot pie, I take this out the day ahead. I thaw it in my refrigerator. Now there are plenty of casseroles you can cook from frozen, and that's fine. This one I'll thaw it in the refrigerator. I'll remove the foil. I'll put it back in the same dish. It's going to conform to the size of this original dish. And with the Grandma's chicken pot pie, you'll get the recipe in just a few minutes, we're going to put a cornbread topping on top, a quick cornbread, and then bake that. So you can use your same container that you originally used to freeze the dish, or reuse that to cook your casseroles. So those are a few tips about freezing and maximizing your freezer space. Let's go on to the next item, resources and tips. There are some good resources online, and I'll ask you, do you generally trust, though, everything that you find online? No. So there are some sites that maybe you shouldn't trust, or at least not to start with. I would suggest using university sites such as this University of Kentucky publication. There are some others at the bottom of your handout from the University of Utah, for instance. The National Center for Home Food Preservation is a very good site. It's everything you would ever want to know about freezing, canning, jams and jellies, a lot of recipes. There are some other nice things on the internet, but sometimes it's hard to know what to trust. And I will say, just because someone makes up a recipe and puts it on the internet doesn't mean it's going to turn out nicely. Maybe it won't taste just right, maybe their instructions are off, and you could waste your time and energy. So there are some more, I'd say go to the sites that you would trust around foods and nutrition as far as the recipes. Usually Southern Living, Cooking Light, All Recipes, those are some good ones. You want to trust their instructions and the taste of the recipe. There are some folks you can follow on Facebook or the internet also that have done a good job. And then we have books that are available, some books and magazines. We'll see those in just a few minutes. You have books and magazines you can check out of the library or buy them in the grocery store if you find one you would really, really like to have. So kind of an overview here of things to consider about freezing is how will you use the frozen item? Is it a casserole? Is it a soup? Is it a snack, for instance? And how will it be used in the end? That affects how you'll package it. Do you thaw it, or will there be more, and eat it, or will there be more steps in the process? How do you want to package? If you go ahead and plan ahead for single servings, smaller servings, you can easily just take those to work or have them at dinner time, share them with family or friends in an individual way. Will you need the container again? As we talked about, making your own aluminum foil container in a dish so you can reuse the container. And are there certain ingredients you want to leave out? And you might learn this over time, depending on the taste you would like or certain preferences your family has, and then judging the size of the meal that you want to make and the size that you want to serve later on. So we're just about ready to wrap things up. I want to share with you the chicken pot pie. Thank you. This is a recipe that we'll taste today, and we're going to look at it in just a few minutes. Here are a few of a wide variety of books and magazines that are out there, and the library does have a good selection. The Douglas County libraries do. So let's look at some instructions on the next slide. Don't get overwhelmed. This is to remind us it's easy to be overwhelmed and just not get started, but start small, be successful, and then build on that. Here is a nice idea for keeping of course, a grocery list. You can keep a list based on the categories of things you want to buy. And then you can also keep a similar list of what's already in your freezer. So you know if there's 3 chicken casseroles and 2 beef stews, you can have that written down. Depending on the size and type of freezer, they can get lost in the freezer. Let's look at some instructions. We're going to taste in just a few minutes our grandma's chicken pot pie. You've got that recipe. I made some changes to this original recipe. Couple of the main changes is I used margarine, I reduced some of the saturated fat, and I increased the amount of vegetables. So we started here. You can start in a skillet or in a deeper pan, and there is our margarine, some flour. You see the instructions there. Sage and thyme are the spices that we used in this. You can adjust those if you'd like to. So you cook that for a few minutes by the instructions. And then we add the chicken broth. The low sodium chicken broth is a good choice. Thank you. I bought this one because it was on sale, a better price than the others. You do not have to buy the organic. You do not have to buy the free range. This was lower sodium. It was a better price, so I happened to buy it at the time. So chicken broth and milk. So you cook that for just a few minutes, and then we're going to add our frozen vegetables and about 1 package of frozen vegetables. Here's an example here. This one has carrots, corn, green beans, and green peas. If your family does not like green peas, then leave those out. Buy frozen whatever your family likes in the same quantity in the recipe. So adjust that and make it work for what your family likes and would like to eat. This package is about the right size, and various stores, they are on sale for 88 cents sometimes, so that's a great price. Sometimes they're a little higher. It's still convenient to use the frozen vegetables. Now the diced chicken, we're adding that next. That's 3 cups. And one thing to say about chicken, when we talked about saving money versus saving time. In looking and thinking about these recipes and other recipes, you can buy chicken anywhere. You can buy chicken quarters for 60 to 70 cents a pound in 10-pound bags. It's a great price. You'll have to, of course, cook those and then remove the bones and the skin of the chicken. You can buy, in some stores, you'll find chicken breast on sale for about $1 a pound, still on the bone. That's a great price. Or, if you're looking to save a bit of time, you can go to the other end of the spectrum. The already roasted chickens you can buy in Kroger, Publix, Ingles, Walmart. One of those will yield about 3 cups. It costs you about $6, maybe more, for that chicken. So you're paying a good bit more, but you're cutting out that time of the cooking and preparing. So there's your spectrum from 60 to 70 cents a pound up to $3 a pound for the chicken portion of this recipe or others. So really, of course, you want to save time and money, but sometimes spending a little more money saves you the time, and that's just the way we live our lives practically. We're not always going to do every step that saves us the maximum amount of money, and that's okay. So if you want to use a rotisserie chicken, you can use that in this recipe. It's chopped, so we'll add that to the pot and cook it for a bit. This is kind of an all-purpose cooking pot here. It's about a 12 to 14 inch pot, and it's about 4 inches deep, and you can use it from everything to the browning in the beginning to mixing in all your ingredients. So then you just have to wash one pot when you're finished. And then the next step is we have our foil as I demonstrated earlier. We'll add the mixture to the dish. We're sealing it up nicely. We want to remove as much air from the package as we can to minimize the freezer burn. And then the next step after that, we're going to add our label here. So I remember what's in the freezer. We slip that in the freezer inside the glass dish until it freezes, and then bring that out and return just the food to the freezer. And then the next step will be, after we've removed the foil and thawed it, we can thaw it back in the same dish. There's our cornbread topping that we make. This is a simple, what I have found, this is a simple package. There are other brands too, cornbread mix. This one is not quite as sweet as the boxed mixes. I like this one better for these purposes. The Jiffy Mix and some of the other brands are a little bit sweeter. I like this one. You only add water, mix it up, pour it over the top, and bake it for about 40 minutes. So you do have this last step in this recipe, and it makes a unique chicken pot pie. We're used to chicken pot pie with kind of a dough, flour, dumpling type topping, but this has a cornbread topping instead. So after you bake it, it comes out nicely, and I think ours is probably coming out pretty soon for samples. So it makes a nice pretty crust for you to have ready for your family. Then there's another simple recipe. On the next slide, we have Tex-Mex chicken enchiladas. There's just a few simple ingredients. We have more of the chopped chicken. I've used whole wheat flour tortillas there, some shredded cheese, frozen chopped mixed vegetables. This is this is peppers and onions, and a jar of salsa and a can of black beans. And basically you mix and assemble are the instructions on this one. So in the next slide we'll see that. You can mix, you have your cooked chicken, and we mix our ingredients. You put it in the center of the tortilla and roll that up. And then after they're rolled up, you see them in the dish on the next slide. You can lay these in the dish. And the great thing about individual type servings is you can freeze these in portions so that you can cook 2 or you can cook 8 or however many you'd like. You can cook a small or a large quantity. So these are frozen just like this in the freezer. We'll wrap it up the same way, and then in the end on the next slide we see them frozen. We've added our label, just a reminder of what we have and how long to cook and how many people we serve. And then we bake them, put them in the same or different casserole dish. We can cook a smaller quantity here, and after they're baked, you can use the lower fat cheese if you'd like. That's a good suggestion on this recipe. And that's another quick and easy thing to do that kids really like. It's a good family meal. So moving on, here's some other resources. You have these on your handout. Some are from the University of Georgia. We have some other state extension offices that are available there. And I think we have some time now for some questions. I do have a quick An evaluation form. I'd like for you to fill out this survey if you wouldn't mind. It has a front and back. Tell me what you learned today, how we can improve the program, what kind of recipes you would like to have. And we have some samples. I think Rose is going to help us here. If you'd like to come up and have a sample of our chicken pot pie, we have those available. You can, yes, use one of those and just like about a half a cup each person.
Thank you, Susan, for coming out.
You're welcome. Thank you. I enjoyed being here.